You know, this has to be one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history. It's the story of a man who pulls off a pretty much perfect crime and then, like a ghost, just vanishes into thin air.
And that's really the question, isn't it? For over 50 years, nobody, not the FBI, not countless amateur sleuths, has been able to put a real face to that name. He is a complete and total phantom.
And look, this isn't just any cold case. It stands completely alone in American criminal history. To this day, it is the only unsolved skyjacking in the country, and that's a huge part of why we're still so fascinated by it.
All right, so let's rewind the clock. Let's go back to where it all started. It's the day before Thanksgiving, 1971, on a Northwest Orient Airlines flight leaving Portland, Oregon. What began as just a totally routine trip, well, it quickly became anything but.
So the guy at the heart of all this was described as quiet, well-dressed, a man in a business suit. He calmly orders a bourbon and soda, and then he passes a note to a flight attendant. The message was simple, absolutely terrifying, and delivered with this just unnerving composure.
And here's a funny thing. The name we all know him by, it's actually wrong. He called himself Dan Cooper. The DB part was a mistake made by the press that just stuck. It became this legendary name for a mystery man. The myth-making started almost immediately.
See, Cooper wasn't some panicked, chaotic hijacker. He was methodical, incredibly precise. He laid out his demands with startling clarity. He wanted a very specific amount of money, a very specific number of parachutes, and he had this clear, two-part plan to trade the passengers for the cash before taking off again.
And just to put this into perspective, $200,000 back in 1971, that was a ton of money. In today's money, you're looking at well over $1.5 million. So yeah, this was a high-stakes heist from the get-go.
Okay, so they land in Seattle. Cooper gets exactly what he asks for. He lets all 36 passengers go, completely unharmed. But for the crew still on that plane, the ordeal was far from over. This is where the story takes its most dramatic, unbelievable turn. So, the plane is back up in the air, flying low, flying slow, on a new course toward Mexico City, just like Cooper wanted. The remaining crew is all isolated up in the cockpit, with absolutely no idea what's about to go down in the back of the plane.
And you have to understand, the conditions outside were just awful. We're talking a cold, stormy night with almost zero visibility. This wasn't some calm, clear day for a skydive. He was choosing to leap into a hostile, completely unforgiving wilderness.
And then, it happened. Cooper straps the bags of cash to his body, he lowers the rear stairs of the Boeing 727, a design feature, by the way, that was later modified on all these planes specifically because of him, and he jumped out into the freezing rain and utter darkness. And after that, just silence. He was gone.
So what came next was one of the biggest, most expensive manhunts in the history of the FBI. The search for Dan Cooper would go on for decades. But the thing is, the trail went cold pretty much the second he stepped off that plane.
I mean, for almost 10 years, absolutely nothing. Then, out of the blue, in 1980, a young boy finds 3 rotting bundles of the ransom money on the banks of the Columbia River. It was this incredible, stunning clue that ultimately led nowhere. The trail went cold all over again, and in 2016, the FBI finally suspended the active investigation.
And this investigation was massive. The FBI looked into hundreds and hundreds of people. You name it, ex-military paratroopers, businessmen with shady pasts, but every single time, every promising lead, every person of interest, it just fizzled out, a complete dead end.
So what happens when you have no body, no real suspect, and only a handful of clues? Well, the case starts to change. It goes from an active investigation to something else, a modern American folktale. And the reason we're still talking about it today? It's precisely because we have no answers.
When you boil it all down, the theories about his fate really split into 2 main camps. On one hand, you have the criminal mastermind. His calm demeanor, his knowledge of the plane, his precise plan, it all points to a pro who knew what he was doing and probably survived. But on the other hand, you have the desperate amateur, a guy totally unprepared for the brutal reality of a nighttime jump into a storm, who almost certainly died the second he hit the ground.
You know, a mystery this big is going to leave a mark. And D.B. Cooper's story has had this huge cultural footprint. Because there are no real answers, the case has inspired countless books, documentaries, movies. That empty space has been filled by endless speculation, turning him into a permanent fixture of American folklore.
And that just brings us right back to where we started, to that one fundamental question. Was he a genius who got away with the perfect crime and lived out his days somewhere quietly? Or was he a fool whose grand plan ended in tragedy in some remote forest? The truth is, we may never know. The only thing we know for sure is the enduring power of his mystery.